Serious former teens who went to wilderness camps, therapeutic boarding schools and other troubled teen programs. What were your experiences? I ran away from home a lot when I was young. Eventually my parents sent me to this super religious detention home in Louisiana. The first day there, I was stripped to my underwear and t-shirt and locked in a closet. I had a coffee can with some pine oil in it to piss in, and a mattress on the floor with one blanket and no pillow. The light switch was outside the closet, so I had no control over the light, day or night. The door had holes drilled into it about head high, and they hung a tape recorder on the door from the outside that played nothing but hellfire and brimstone preachers and church services 8 hours a day. I was allowed out twice a day to poop, and once every other day to shower, but that was it for the first 3 weeks. When I finally got put into the general population, I made it about a week before I managed to run away. But they caught me in Dallas and sent me right back. I was locked in the closet again for another 2 weeks. But then shortly after that the state came in and shut the whole place down for abuse and neglect. It was utter and complete hell. Beatings and Jesus. 24/7. I can't even begin to describe the conditions or the stereotypical low IQ Deep South morons running the place. I've been told I should write a book about my experiences there. But it. What's done is done, and most of those people are dead now anyway. Good riddance. Says I. Went to Dundee Ranch Academy when I was 15. I am 32 now. It was shut down by the embassy for child abuse and living conditions among other things. I was there for a year and I still have nightmares of being trapped or jailed and other triggers. Sucks. I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy. Just got out of a year-long program for drug abuse, behavioral therapy type stuff, and it was religion-based, and it was definitely something that I was not prepared to get myself into. I ended up getting an assault charge and sent to basically a prison for juveniles for a few days while I was there because a kid dumped 2 gallons of water on my bed and I whipped him with a guitar string. Not the best choice I've ever made. Now it is off my record, but that was definitely a turning point in the way I treat myself and others. I've got a lot of stories from there, so if you wanna hear any, I'm open. My experience with being forced to stay at a boarding school was horrible. It was highly abusive in uncountable ways. The staff were unprofessional and most certainly not there to comfort you in any way. They actually did the opposite and called us names like liars and manipulators, and overall tried to make you feel like a bad person. They controlled every aspect of every moment of your waking life. It was not therapeutic at all. Anyone who says otherwise who went to these places is either brainwashed and in denial or enjoyed the sadism of bullying other students. The ones willing to snitch on and mistreat others did well and advanced in the program. I was emotionally victimized by staff and students. There was no such thing as personal space or privacy. I was physically assaulted and abused by the staff. I am appalled these schools are still around and operating. Parents that put their children through that hell. They should not be legally allowed to continue to abuse children for profit. There's too many examples of abuse to put in one post. I am happy and relieved to say the school I was sent to was shut down for child abuse. Thank God. Was sent to a Marine-style boot camp for troubled teens. I was sent there because I was in a hole towards my parents. Discovered upon arrival I was the only person sent there who was not in trouble with the law for assault, robbery, or drug possession, and I was made platoon leader of a bunch of kids who would probably end up in UV after the camp. Fun times. Would recommend for the amount of beatings, chewings, and gayness that went on there. Already commented this on a different thread, but I was forced into partial inpatient on the psych ward when I was 17 or 18 for about 6 weeks because I was considered to be an at-risk youth. It was basically like a diversionary program. Ever watched Girls Incarcerated on Netflix? It was kind of like that. Total supervision, walking in lines, rec hours, community meetings, the whole bit. All possessions got locked away from us and we got randomly drug tested a lot. Most of it was the same as juvenile hall. It wasn't too scary, or even that depressing, actually. The other patients were great. I became friends with a lot of them, and we even still keep in touch. In terms of the staff, many were phenomenal, while some were just not cut out to work in the field. To put it mildly, they could be super mean and harsh for no reason, and would blow up faster than us patients. Most of our time was spent in groups DBT. talk therapy, relaxation, recreation, etc. Mostly we just learned about coping skills and had to address what had happened that resulted in our hospitalizations. We also would get pulled out of group a lot to meet with therapists, NPs, nurses, psychiatrists, etc., to have one-on-one therapy or to adjust med levels. We had these goal sheets we had to complete each day, and on them they had this f***ed-up behavioral rating system. Some of the staff lived for docking points. Usually enough docked points meant an extended stay. I spent like 2 weeks begging and pleading to leave, and I swear they lengthened my admission every single time I asked. Food was given to us in labeled cardboard boxes. Everything served was vile. There were a ton of rules. No physical contact. No sharing food. No touching your face. No rocking back and forth in your chair. A bunch of other weird rules about food. No speaking out of turn. The bathroom wasn't allowed a lock, and they could basically walk in on you whenever. Absolutely everything needed permission. I mean everything. Permission was needed to stand up and walk less than a foot away to get water from the cooler. There were a ton more, but I don't remember most of them. Kinda blocked out the ones that were worse and more unreasonable. It sucked. But I know a lot of other facilities are way worse. So I try to keep that in perspective. I was sent to one located in Baja California, called Teen Care Camp. Despite the name, it wasn't the summer camp they tried to make themselves out to be. I was sent there at age 14. For being an at-risk teen, I was ditching classes, going out after school, having a boyfriend, and just not listening to my parents. The duration of my stay was 1 year, and I was discharged from the facility right before my 16th birthday. I was kidnapped when 2 large individuals, male and female, unlocked the door to my bedroom in my family home at about 3 a.m. They flashed a badge at me and told me that I had done some things which got me in trouble and that they were taking me away. They proceeded to handcuff me and then lead me out to the Suburban and shackle my ankles to the SUV. My father came out to see what was going on and to say something to them, but my mother was nowhere in sight. Mind you, I had never done drugs, nor did I even smoke a cigarette at this point in time. When I arrived, I met many kids between the age of 13 to 21 who were already doing basically heavier drugs like that. Several of the girls at the camp were also underage workers to support their habit, and also had been in trouble with the law and were in and out of rehabs and facilities such as that one. Daily, they would have us do self-study homeschooling for 3 hours, and for the remainder of the day they would have us do chores and group. The groups consisted of what they called a hot seat in the middle of the room, where they would hurl insults at the girl in the hot seat to break them down in attempts to make them stop lying or doing whatever other bad behavior they were doing. I recall being put in this hot seat several times, then being called a piece of waste of human space, that I was unwanted, which is why I was sent there. Hearing this several times during my stay, sometimes several times in a day at that age, was extremely damaging to my self-worth, confidence, and self-esteem. There would be other groups throughout the day to discuss the different stories and things that the girls had been through. All in all, it was like networking, or so it seemed like. There were reports of the counselors taking advantage of the kids at both the boys and girls camps, though I never experienced any of it myself. If any of us were to get in trouble, we would be sent to this little room in the backyard. It basically was a concrete room, with 4 walls and a roof over it. The door was a heavy wooden door and was locked on the outside by a big piece of lumber and a padlock. The walls had small windows on them, 2 on each wall, and they were big enough to fit your head through, but nothing else. There was no glass to cover the windows. Within the room were 3 wooden beds, basically a wooden surface that was lifted off of the ground. We would have to sleep in this room and stay in this room during the day. There was no bathroom. We were given a bucket. We were forced to wear an orange jumpsuit, and during the day, we were made to dig a hole in the ground or do other various hard labor in the yard as punishment for what we may have done. We weren't allowed to wear a bra, just so if we tried to escape we couldn't just tie the jumpsuit around our waist and run away. If we were defiant and we were sent to this box, they would hog-tie us and pepper spray us into submission. And for the extreme, they would then suggest the parents send the kids over to a wilderness camp that they were affiliated with. All of these camps make a tremendous amount of money, and if one kid was referred to another, they'd get a referral finder's fee in exchange. so it was just a vast network of them working with one another. If I had to say if this place was harmful or helpful, I would have to say harmful. It's been well over 17 years, and while I am able to talk about this place today, I still do not forgive my parents for what they did to me. Note: this camp was shut down shortly after I was discharged. I was told the federales came in with guns and demanded everyone leave the property. So the counselors took the kids to places where they felt were safe away from the camp owner and tried to arrange for them to go back to their families. The camp owner, as I understood it, tried to open another camp. However, that is something that was speculated. Stories emerged later on that he was doing drugs with many of the boys over at the boys' camp and assaulted several of them as well. None of those stories were really looked into though, as far as I know. I went to 4 of them. Most of us didn't need outpatient wilderness treatment. We needed parents. I got sent to a military school across the country for a year because I smelled funny one night. Now I was drunk and high on ether, but that's besides the point. I went in with a shallow knowledge of drugs and came out with a master's degree. Fortunately, I found my feet after a few years of the lifestyle and am just an average drinker now that will occasionally indulge in some reefer. Overall, I would suggest that putting a bunch of people with similar problems together for an extended period of time isn't really a great idea. I was definitely one of the fresh fish there. Most of those kids had way more serious issues. Just based on what they claimed. Hard to say. Was at Spring Creek Lodge in Montana 2004-2005. While I was there, a girl hung herself. I still remember her name. The lower levels were divided into families and you could only talk to the other girls in your family. Everything was earned from the right to use condiments to getting a candy bar once a week. You're on silence 22 hours a day. Talking to someone your own level takes away points. Talking on silence takes away points. They had upper-level girls in charge of lower-level girls. Some of the family mothers were super sweet, some were not. This was in Montana, so we had a lot of ex-meth heads on the staff, who were awesome. They made us go to these weird seminars that were super invasive and supposed to be life-changing. Discovery and Focus were a couple of their names. I could write a book on these seminars. It was a lot of work on trauma and getting out of your comfort zone done by people who were not trained. The goal was to graduate, but most didn't. This place was expensive if you weren't court-ordered, so most parents took their kids home eventually. Oh yeah, they would read and edit your letters home, lol. If you begged to go home, you'd get demerits for manipulation. A lot of sleep deprivation on the upper levels too, and one time the heat went out so it was freezing. Montana winters are no joke. I loved Sundays because we deep clean and get PB&Js and a movie. I did make some lifelong friends there and people I'll never forget. First real connections I'd made in years. I went in with a lot of trauma and drug issues. I could go on and on, but what a crazy 10 months. I turned 18 in there and told my parents I'd walk to the homeless shelter if they didn't take me out. So they did. I couldn't sleep or shower alone for months. I had been around people 24/7 for so long. The worst was when people would disappear in the middle of the night to get sent to other programs. I got my HS diploma by taking the same tests over and over in a trailer we went to for class. Okay, that's enough from me. I could go on and on. Thanks for letting me share. I was in a very odd Christian counseling for a week following my grandfather trying to kill me for being gay. It was basically the counselor asking questions about my father, then immediately saying, "You are not gay. Your father was never around and you are chasing that affection." The thing was, I had already experienced a lot of from my abusive childhood. Physical, all of it, so I brushed it off pretty easily. It was so funny watching her smile when I would ask questions about the Bible, because some of those stories are fascinating. It was like an on-off switch to counselor's brain about Bible, God good, and anything else bad. Both my parents were addicts, and having to learn to pick apart their expressions to what kind of mood they would end up on was easy by the time I was 15. Unfortunately, it also got me to bury my emotions and never process the trauma. I was diagnosed PTSD in 2011. Underwent therapy that changed my life. I didn't want to believe it at first, but man, had my life and myself changed so much thanks to PTSD therapy. I went to a 13-month therapeutic boarding school, aka residential treatment center, till I turned 18. It was in Utah, and the worst experience of my life. I have long-term PTSD and issues 10 years later. We are not coincidentally called survivors. I watched a person having a seizure get pressure pointed till they died. I watched a teenage girl held down by 3 adult men scream like a wild animal. I've never heard anything like it. I watched therapists convince girls they lied about assaults or abortions, and tell their parents they were liars when they weren't. They strip-searched you, made you squat and cough naked, even if you just went off campus to the dentist and were with staff the entire time. Even in the bathroom. When they inuk you the first time, they kept your underwear in a plastic bag. We were told this was for the dogs in case you run away. The worst was just the long-term, systematic institutionalized breaking down of innocence, creativity, and independence that these kids might have otherwise been able to revel in, had they been born in different families or households. I didn't talk to my parents for years. Our relationship will be strained forever. The school was finally shut down for child abuse 3 years after I left, but reopened under a different name. The group that owned it, Aspen Education Group, owned by CRC Health, owned by the Boone Group, on which Mitt Romney sits a board member, has tried to keep me from getting my HIPAA and legally entitled medical documents for a decade.